as we're listening to her story, I asked her at the end of it, so what even started like all this conversation about Jesus and baptism and all that? And her response was this: I just watched mom and dad spend time with Jesus. And I'm like, man, that's so good, right? Like, parents, you have this ministry inside your living room, inside your house every single day. And the way you model your life after Jesus, the way you lead has an impact. I just looked at them at the end of that baptism and I get like emotional because they're just doing it well. Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we take a deeper dive into Sunday's message and explore any questions you might have. I'm your host, AJ Stevens, joined by lead pastor Chip Parker, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops. All right, well, we're back, and we have a special guest with us today.
I appreciate you saying that, AJ. I don't really consider myself a guest at this point, but I appreciate it.
Is Lucas Lott.
Oh, yeah.
Lucas, how we doing?
Yes. So stoked to be here.
Yeah, do you mean that? Did you feel like you meant that?
Yeah, it's a Monday.
Fair enough.
Look, I'm going to be honest. It is like the Mondayest Monday I've had in a while.
Yeah.
And so I'm really leaning on you two guys to bring the energy today because you guys are like the hype men at the Orchard. If there's somebody loud, it's probably one of you two. Unless I'm arguing about something, then I'm loud. So I'm ready for you guys to bring the energy. And I think maybe to start us just out on the right foot, keeping it with the fact that we promised the people we are always going to be transparent, straightforward with them. I think it's important they know this will be the first podcast Lucas has ever listened to.
True or false, Lucas?
Partially.
Partially true. Guy is fresh. But hey, real quick, before we dive in, because we got Lucas with us today, and we're going to have some awesome conversation with him. We're going to ask him some questions. We're going to get to know him a little bit better. We're going to see what he does. We're going to see whether or not that's important. And then we're going to keep the conversation going from there. But before we dive in, I want you guys to know that we love that you guys listen. We love that this is helpful. We've heard some awesome feedback from you guys. So we would ask that if you guys are regular listeners, that you guys would step in and help us out by subscribing, by sharing, leaving a review. Because every time you listen to the podcast, every time you do one of those things, it helps us out. It helps push the content. And we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think it was content that wasn't valuable.
So, AJ, is there a reason that you made unbroken eye contact with Lucas the whole time you said that?
Right, because I was thinking to myself, like, I'm saying this, but we brought Lucas on, so, like, how much do we mean it, right? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. It's going to be really, really good. For real, I think our people are going to get to enjoy getting to know you a little bit better, especially because the majority of people who don't go to Live Oak, right, they see you on stage specifically during the nights of worship. And so we'll talk about some of that, but it'll be good to get to know the guy on stage a little bit. But let's do that now. I want you to introduce yourself to us, Lucas. Who are you? Where do you come from? Why do you do what you do? Do you have a favorite color? Give us the whole rundown here.
Yeah. I feel like it's pretty black and white, right? So
Favorite color or...
no, just I'd like to think of myself as not a very interesting person. I don't know. But, man, let me talk about, oh, goodness, where do I begin? Ministry itself, how I got here, how I kind of took this step. I grew up in church, kind of like the poster child for the Baptist faith, right? My dad was a worship pastor all of my life, and I told myself that I never wanted to do that. I was like, man, I just saw the ins and outs of ministry through his life and through just the things that he dealt with, but watched him do that with so much grace and so much integrity. At the same time, I didn't want to do that. I was like, man, I do not want to do that. And God, we all know, has a massive sense of humor and flipped my life upside down when I was in high school and called me into ministry, and I haven't really looked back since. It's been a bumpy but good road the last 12 years of full-time ministry, but God has been good and he's been faithful, and that's how he has brought me here, following in my dad's footsteps in worship ministry here at the Orchard. I've been here almost 2 years, but it has just been a good time, man. God has really been faithful and good through all of that.
So let me hop in here because you said, growing up your dad was a worship pastor, but it's not was as in past tense. He's still a worship pastor, right? And for those of you who don't know, Lucas's dad is the worship pastor at First Baptist Church of Live Oak. And as you already heard, Lucas leads at the Orchard Live Oak. So I'm just curious, like, is it weird, like, being a worship leader, like, across the road, essentially, from your dad? Like, how has that dynamic been since you've been here?
You know, I thought it would be a little weird when I first moved back. I did honestly think that there would be some kind of, like, I don't know, tension, right? Like, you know, small town, small church communities. And
well, look, we all know churches in small towns never compete about anything.
No, never.
Yeah, it's one big happy family.
First Baptist, Second Baptist, third. No, no. I seriously did think there would be some tension, but it's been the exact opposite, man. I think that having him as an ear to listen to things, having him as a voice of wisdom, like right down the road, right? You know, that's just been amazing for me. And being able to lean on him for ministry decisions, but then also partner with him in ministry and do events with him and just grow the community of worship ministry together has just been awesome. Doing that, you know, right down the road has just been a blessing for me.
Yeah. Hey, I want to stop real quick because you said God called you to ministry, and I feel like for maybe the average listener, right, when we say stuff like that, they don't really know what that means. Like, what does it mean? I actually had a student pull me aside the other day and say, hey, like, you say God called you. What does that mean? What does it mean that God called you? Did he speak to you? Was it audible? Was it a moment? So maybe just for you, because it's not that every situation's the same. Some are different, but I'm curious, would you be willing to share what that calling looked like the moment you knew, okay, this is what I'm doing? Because you didn't want to do it from what it sounds like, right? You want no part of that. So I would love for you to just real quick share that story.
Absolutely not. No, it was really, I felt like I had, especially in my early years of high school, I felt like I had kind of a vision of what I kind of thought my life would look like and what I wanted to do. Again, looking back, I had been in, you know, I guess a ministry family my entire life. And so looking back at that, I said, I don't want this for my life. You know, even though God is lining up the talents, right? I have a voice, I can sing, I have a love for music, and he's kind of lining these things up and making some things clear. I'm just running in the opposite direction. I'm not really living for him. My life doesn't really reflect that. I kind of had this idea for my life, and, you know, I was trying this, I was trying that, just trying to fill that void of this is what I want to do. And when I was a junior in high school, our youth pastor at the time kind of called for ministry decisions. I don't know if you've ever really experienced anything like that in life or in ministry, where they say, like, hey, if you're interested in going into ministry, why don't you come forward?
Sure.
And so I did. In those moments, I just kind of, you know, God had been speaking to me. He had been working on me. He had been closing some doors. And so I just kind of stood up and said, you know what, I feel led to do this. And so I walked down, and there was a group of other students there with me. My wife was one of those at the time. We were dating at the time. And we walked down together, and we just felt like the Lord was calling us into ministry together. And so, you know, long story short, I look back at that group of people, and there's two people who are still in ministry from that, and that's me and my wife. But that was the moment I felt like God called me into ministry. It wasn't a just this, I don't know how to put it other than it was a decision that I made, but it was a yearning in my soul. Like God said, hey, this is what I have for you. And it was like something clicked in my head, and I knew right then and there that was the moment that Jesus was calling me into his ministry. It's cool, making things clear.
I was going to say, you know, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about a call to ministry a lot of times, there is confusion about like what that means and what it doesn't mean. And so I think it is important for us to kind of unpack that a little bit. And I like the word that Lucas used when he said yearning, right? Because what Paul says when he's talking to Timothy is that there are people who desire, you know, the work of the ministry. And he says it in 1 Timothy chapter 3, specifically maybe about the pastorate. But I do think that's one of the first signs that God is calling you into something is the desire he gives you for it, right? And so sometimes those things, like you said, it was my decision, but God gave me that yearning. I think those things go hand in hand. We talk about calling a lot. Like, there are callings, I'm sure, that you're going to have to go into kicking and screaming because, like, I really, really don't want to do this. But then most of the time, at least from my experience, I think from what Scripture teaches, it sounds a lot like your life, Lucas, where I didn't want this, but God changed what I wanted so that eventually that's where I got.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened for me.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of the passages I refer to often, one of my favorite ones, Psalm 37:4. Says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And I think the overwhelming pursuit there, if I'm chasing after God, there's going to be a moment where my desires line up with his desires, whether or not they were initially that.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. You know, I had desires, But when it clicked for me and God made that calling clear, my desires changed completely in that moment. And I desired to serve him in ministry. I desired to see the ministry grow. I desired to see his work in my life. Philippians 1:6 says, he who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it. And so in those moments, I realized that process that he had been cultivating in me, right? He had constantly, the potter with the clay, he'd been chipping away the things. That at that moment, he made it clear. And that was when I was like, hey, this is what you have for me, and I'm going to run at it.
Yeah, and that's not exclusive. It's not exclusive to ministerial callings, right? I think for the believer, we're all in this race together, and sometimes it looks like a job, sometimes it looks like a moving of place or whatever. I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, I don't know that I'm called to ministry, but I've been wrestling with a similar tension in my life, then maybe that is God saying, hey, I got something for you. I need you to step into it. Want you to step into it, kind of thing. And so, man, if you're listening, we'd love to grab lunch coffee if you've been having some of those urges, impulses, and trying to wade through them.
Well, I think, that there's two thoughts that kind of shape the way I look at what we're talking about right now. The biggest kind of way I think about it comes from a book by Jason Keith Allen, who is the president of Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. And he kind of breaks it down like this. He says, every believer is called to ministry. Right? If you're following Jesus, you need to be involved in ministry of some kind. And I think sometimes we do a disservice in church world by making ministry only stuff that happens on Sundays or Wednesdays inside the church. Right. That's not what he means, right? But every believer is called to ministry. There are some believers who are called to a ministry where God gives you a call for, hey, no, this is what I want you to do for your ministry, for your life. Right. And that can be as a volunteer, that can be leading something, outside of the church. And then there are some who is maybe even a smaller group who God calls to the ministry, which we would say is vocational ministry. Dr. Allen says it's the ministry of the word, right? Whether through preaching the word or leading in worship through the word, that vocational ministry. So there's those three tiers. We're all called to ministry. Some are called to a ministry, and then God calls even fewer to the ministry. And then that same idea maybe even fleshed out a little bit simpler. One of my friends who's a pastor in Tallahassee says, every Christian is called, not employed. So no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're working, it should be because you're called there, you're not employed. You're not there just to draw a paycheck. God has you there for a reason. God has you there for a part of his mission in expanding his kingdom. And so every follower of Jesus, none of us are just employed. We're all called in some way, sense, or form.
Yeah, I think maybe your wife, perfect example of that, right? You said you two went down front, yet only one of you is on staff, but it's not diminishing what she does in her role in ministry. So maybe introduce us to your wife, Spark Notes, who is she, all that kind of stuff. And then maybe even on the backside of that, how many kids you got? What are they like?
Yeah, so I'm a little hesitant to introduce you to her because she's so much brighter and better than I.
Yeah.
And so
that's usually the case, by the way.
Yeah. Usually when I introduce her to people after, a night of worship or whatever, we're like, well, you were okay, but who's this girl over here? Man, she has just been a rock in my life. It's crazy. We just went through a series on dating and student ministry. That's the subsect of my job. I also lead the student ministry in Live Oak, but we just went through this series on dating, and I'm telling them, like, hey, be patient. A lot of times people don't find their significant other, like their partner for life in high school, and yet here I am. I met my wife when I was in 9th grade, and we've been dating and together ever since. And God used her as an instrumental tool in my life to really steer me towards ministry, to correct some things, and just be a constant for me. But man, Rachel is my wife. She is just so much, she's such a blessing to me, and just really has been.
Guys, just racking up the brownie points over here.
Yeah, he's working on it. I respect.
No, you can see his face. There's a genuineness about this.
Well, it's like I could sit here and we could joke, about a million different things, but when you strip all of that away, it's like that's who I spend every single day with, right. And she is just someone who continually pushes me forward, who helps me in ministry. She leads worship with me every single week, but. As much of a blessing as that is, she is an encourager. She is someone who holds me accountable, and I just could not do what I do without her as a part of that.
Hey, quick question. Does she listen to the podcast?
Yeah,
She'll listen to this one.
I don't know. I'm gonna
Let's
let.
be like, hey, I just thought we'd listen to this while we're driving, see what these guys have been up to.
Yeah,
Don't start with this one. Start with like one before it. Let this one build up as a surprise.
yeah. I'm gonna let you ask her that question. No. But no, outside of that, man, we have had just 3 of the biggest blessings. We had 3 kids. We thought we were going to have 2. We stopped. We were like, hey, we're going to stop at 2, And that, again, going back to God's massive
AJ just like freaked out over there for just a second.
No. Yeah.
So I guess we should clarify. AJ also has surprise number 3 on the way.
Yeah, maybe surprise isn't the right word.
How about
Because at this point, it's no secret how it happens, right?
well, I don't know that it's a surprise. It was a okay, we're doing this now.
Yeah, fair enough.
No. So early on, I'd say we were almost 2 years into marriage. We found out we were pregnant with our first son, Liam. He is 7 years old now, and man, he is just the best little kid you could possibly ask for. He was a great first kid, and man, he's just a blessing in my life every single day. The way that he looks up to me, the way that he trusts me as his father, the way he impresses me, just over and over and over again, tackling things that are hard and learning and taking school head on, something that he was struggling with at first, but now is excelling in. It's just blowing my mind. And then, of course, our second child, Leah Claire, comes along. And we had the just model first child, and then we have our daughter, and it's like, what did we do? What did we do? Where did she come from? Who are your parents?
If you had the second child first, a lot of times it'd be the only child.
Yes, yeah. That's right. And those first couple of years with her were a little difficult, but now she's just the sweetest little girl. Her personality's come a long way, and she's definitely a lover, and man, just so sweet and so loving to be around. And then, of course, we ended with our bookend, hopefully ended with our bookend, Lachlan. Yeah, fingers crossed if you could see. Lachlan, he is our youngest. He is 2 years old, and he has just been the best third leg of the kids that we could have possibly asked for. It's just been great.
That's good. Well,
I noticed you said third leg, not last.
More to come.
No.
I gotcha.
This is the end of the journey.
Well,
It's more for my sanity than it is anything.
This is one thing that you guys just in unison drank your coffee. Yeah, no, that's crazy. But one thing that all 3 of us have in common is we are fathers. And so if you're listening to this and you're a dad, you're on the road or whatever, we're about to normalize being a dad for a second, probably. And so
are we going to do dad stories?
I'm open to it, right?
All right. So we gotta go dad stories. So Lucas, give us your favorite dad story.
I feel like you guys should start.
You ponder that for a second because mine's a no-brainer.
All right, go for it.
I don't know that it's a favorite moment. Probably, in fact, the fact that it's my least favorite moment is why it's such a core memory for me. But I remember Dax he was old enough to walk, so I don't know if he was just over 2 or whatever, but we had gone to the pediatrician and I was taking him and he had been on this 24-hour bug and he was just spewing, dude, just looked like somebody took chocolate milk and just every hour, right? And it was just getting bad. And so he had gone through a 24-hour period of this, and finally the next day rolls around and we're like, all right, I think he's fine. We're going to take him to the pediatrician, all this kind of stuff. And so we go and, well, it's his dad. Katie had to work that day. And so I take him to the pediatrician and we roll up there and I'm like, all right, he hasn't done this in 3 hours. I think we're safe because it had been every hour or so up to this point. So we get down there, no big deal. Everything's fine. We go into the appointment. I'm like, I think he's okay. I think we're kind of coming out of this. He hasn't made a mess in 3 hours. And we come out, they do all the paperwork, whatever. And I'm like, all right, that's great. I'm just going to go right next door to get some coffee because our pediatrician's in Alachua right there, actually next to Canvas Church. Go into the coffee shop and get my coffee. And I come out. As we're opening my back door, he has what ends up being the last mess that he's going to make, dude. And when I tell you, it's just horrific, right? I put him up on the back seat to go ahead and change his diaper because I hadn't actually got my coffee yet. I put the order in and then we went back to the truck, and this is happening on the way back to the truck. And I put him up in my back seat, and it's so bad that when his body tips horizontal, it just comes gushing out of the top of his diaper. And I'm like, there's nothing else to do besides just get this kid naked in the parking lot, right? And so I strip him down right there in the pediatrician's parking lot, and and I got like every wipe in my car is just giving this kid a bath right here, and I got no clothes. He has to ride home in a diaper because I didn't have a change of clothes, and so it was just core memory as far as dadding goes. Was the moment I tipped my kid horizontal and everything just came gushing out of the top of his diaper.
I'm really hoping that people aren't listening to this on their lunch break.
Yeah, me too. But, you know,
Great,
we're
dang.
normalizing.
Somebody's sipping their chocolate milk right now. They're like,
right.
put this down.
Well, all right.
For every moment like that, I'll say this. For every moment that you have as a dad that's like that, you have the other moments where your kid crawls up in your lap and just says, Dad, I just want you to know I love you, right? Out of nowhere for no reason. And if our kid's good for one thing, it's just making sure that you know that you're loved by him. So
Nobody's here for those stories.
just tell me you don't have those stories.
All right, so my story, I'll go with a bathroom story as well. But Haddon, my oldest, was a little bit older. I think he was probably like preschool age, you know, he's going to school or whatever. And we were at the mall in Gainesville, and it was game day, and the place was like packed, right? And he's got to use the bathroom. And usually I would let Leanne take him to the bathroom because, you know, another story, I had her convinced there weren't changing tables in men's room for like years, but somebody blew that for me. So
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, right. But the line of the women's bathroom is just like backed out like crazy. So I'm like, fine, I'll take him. I'll go. So I take him into the bathroom. We go into a stall that's open. And, you know, and he's at the age, you know, preschool age, like the pants and the pull-up got to come down for him to use the bathroom, right? But he couldn't quite like reach the toilet. And so then what I do is I say, okay. And so I just kind of like pick him up and like stick my leg and knee out where he can kind of rest on my knee and reach the toilet to pee. And we're in this crowded bathroom, guys waiting, washing their hands, every stall full. I've got him propped up on my knee where he can pee. And then in the middle of this dead silence that only happens in a men's bathroom, he goes, Dad, get that out of my butt.
Oh,
no.
And immediately, okay, we're done. Don't say another word. Pull up, you know, pants. We're walking out. We don't make eye contact. We just go, Leanne, take your son. We got to leave. We got to go now.
how old is he at this point?
Like preschool age, like maybe 4-ish.
Right. Man, that's tough. And stuff.
So cringe.
A van with child services pulls in behind Chip on his way out.
It's so bad.
Well, tell us yours, Lucas. What's your
Yeah.
favorite? Or
I'll,
maybe not favorite.
I'll go a
memory.
different direction. I'll go a different direction. I won't take the bathroom route because I've got too many of those and they're all absolutely disgusting. All of my kids are prone to injury. I'm sure that all of yours are as well. But from the time that Liam was young, he's fallen, busting his head open, getting staples in his head, right? Just different crazy stories like that. Leah Claire just had stitches in her head. Same spot, same area. She falls at the football game, splits her head open. And it's just like, you know, all of these injuries left and right. So I know it's coming for a lot.
Child service isn't just coming to my house.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, I'm just going to wrap them all in bubble wrap and roll them around everywhere. When Liam was in kindergarten, just a normal day in the spring semester, I get a call from my wife, and she says, hey, you need to get to school. Liam fell, and he hurt himself. I'm like, okay, whatever, you know. It's just another
Just
day.
the most dad thing ever to be like, yeah, okay. Because I know my wife wouldn't just be like, yeah, because she'd be like, we need to get there now.
Yeah, and she's like, well, she did. She was like, you need to get there now. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Right.
You know, it's probably just a bruised knee or whatever. And so I pull up to the school. I run inside. I'm like, hey, you know, I'm here to pick up my son. What's going on? I go into the nurse's office, and the kid's got like a mound of napkins on his face. And I'm like, what's happening? They take the napkins away. The dude fell, and he busted his teeth out on a metal bench. All three of his front teeth, baby teeth, on a metal bench. He fractured his jaw on the top, and dude's not crying a single
Just
tear.
a gangster. Just
Absolute, like, blowing my mind, because this is the type of kid that if I say that I'm disappointed with him, he's going to look at me and start tearing up. And I'm like, okay. But yet you bust all your teeth out on a metal bench and you're not crying at all. No, so I grab the kid. I take him to, you know, the dentist. They remove the teeth. We end up having to go into Jacksonville. They remove the teeth. He goes well over a year not having his front three teeth. It's hilarious. We have so many pictures of him.
just
Just absolutely toothless, grinning, you know, cheek to cheek. But man, I think the most precious memory in that story, though, is when we're sitting in the dentist office and they're getting ready to do a surgery. He's like, Dad, I'm scared. I'm scared. And I just look at him and I say, you know, man, I wouldn't put you in that chair if I thought you were going to get hurt. I wouldn't put you in that chair if I thought that this wasn't going to be okay. And he looked at me, he said, all right, I can do this. And I just think that was a special memory. That's a core memory, like you said.
Yeah,
That's a core memory. I'll never forget that.
Yeah. So, which I think alludes to the fact that he trusts you, right? Which maybe is a good segue to this question. I got two questions I want to ask both of y'all. What's been your favorite thing about being a dad? One of your favorite things about being a dad?
Man, whooping them kids.
Whooping them kids, boy.
Correction. No. I think, to go along with what I just said, obviously that was a joke, but
I was hoping he was going to say just kidding, but he didn't. And I was like,
no.
He hesitated real hard.
Yeah, I did. I'm thinking about this morning. Right. No. They were good this morning. But I think part of that is coming back on the other side of discipline for me has been just a learning experience for me. My dad always tells me, don't spank them out of anger. Don't discipline them out of anger. Calm down and do it, logically. And I feel like every dad's probably like, what does that even mean? Because I'm always angry. But coming on the other side of that and seeing the fruit on the other side of those conversations has just been mind-blowing. After I discipline a child, whether it's, spanking, grounding them from something, whatever, having them sit in timeout, I always come back a few minutes later and we sit down and we have a conversation. I don't care how young they are, Lachlan or Leah Claire, 2 and 3 years old, or Liam, who's 7 now. I always come back on the other side of that and I sit them down and I say, hey, I want you to know why you got in trouble and I want you to know how we can fix this in the future. And then it always ends the same. They grab me, they hug me, they tell me they love me, and they walk out. Like, It's always like, why did you spank me? They never say that. They never say, why did you spank me? Why did you discipline me? Why are you taking all of my nice things away? It's always, I understand, Dad. I love you.
It's good.
So that's been rewarding for me.
Yeah, good. Chip, what about you? What's your favorite thing or one of your favorite things about being a dad?
I don't know if this is exactly what you're going for, but I think that
I have no presupposition here, so it's
fair enough.
Yeah.
I think my favorite thing about being a dad, my favorite, kind of just general thing is seeing my boys just like when they get belly laugh tickled about something, like just when they just get like cracked up and just start dying laughing.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite moments. And the oldest is a teenager now, so it's like not quite as often as it used to be. But man, every time they just get tickled about something and just start belly laughing.
Joey is contagious, isn't it? Like it just to see that right from them, and then it just becomes this thing where you're watching and you're like, man, now I'm laughing because you're laughing, and we're all laughing.
It's good stuff.
It's good stuff. That's good stuff. Well, then maybe follow-up question for you guys: what's been one of the most challenging parts to being a dad?
I would say probably being a dad.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe
It's pretty all-encompassing.
It's there's just moments where you get all the advice you can, from mentors, from your dad, from scripture, from books, and there's just times when you're like, I've got no idea what I'm supposed to do in this situation.
Yeah,
and I don't think anybody prepares you for how many times you just like have no idea what to do, but you have to figure it out and do something.
That's it. Yep.
So I think that's tough. I will say maybe from not a personal perspective, but something that my wife and I have talked about for a while now, because we have seen it in the years that we've been in ministry too, is that nobody talks about the amount of time you're going to be the parent of an adult child, right? Because your kids are going to be adults a lot longer than they're going to be kids. And you're going to have a relationship with them as adults a lot longer than you will while they're kids. And so I think trying to parent in such a way that you still have that relationship with them when they're on their own, with their own family, and it's a good, healthy relationship, I think that's something that I can't say it's the most challenging at this part because we're not there yet, but I will say that I have seen it be challenging. And so kind of making sure that we're parenting in a way that happens is something that's on our minds.
That's good. That's good. I think, I don't know about you guys, and as far as, you and your wife's relationships and how you handle different roles in the family and different, responsibilities, but I'm typically the disciplinarian, right? So my wife, She has a harder time, getting their attention. She doesn't have that dad voice, I guess you could say. She doesn't have dad voice.
The dad voice.
Yeah, and so she relies on that dad voice quite a bit. I mean, there'll be times where I'm sitting in the office, on a Tuesday when we're doing communicators meeting, and I'll get a call, I'll step out, or whatever, and it's, hey, I need your dad voice for a second. Or on a Saturday, hey, I need your dad voice for a second. Puts it on speakerphone.
I will end you.
Yes. I'll be home in 30 minutes. And they're all like military, yes, sir. But, I think it's something that's been challenging for me is turning that off at times. So this is what I mean is, being that disciplinarian, stepping into the difficult moments and threatening if you need to, whatever else it might need to be, but then turning that off and being the compassionate father too, the one who listens, the one who gives second chances, and the one who exemplifies Jesus in those moments and says hey, I get it, you messed up, but I'm going to show grace in these moments because Jesus showed grace, and here's how I want that to look. And that's been very challenging for me because, being an emotional person, I get angry, I get upset, and so it's easy to discipline when you're angry because you're like, hey, you messed up, now there's consequences. But then to flip that and sprinkle some gospel in there to say, you know what, there's grace still.
Yeah.
And here's how I'm going to show that grace. That's been very challenging to me to balance those two and to do that in a way that my kids are like, hey, my dad loves me, but he means business.
Mm-hmm.
That has been super hard. And
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, there's a unique role the father gets, and there's a unique role the mother gets, right? Obviously, we don't have any moms on here this morning. It's just the three of us dads. But as we were sitting there, Katie and I left church yesterday and drove down to Jonesville Baptist Church, and we sat through, I don't know what you would call it, a lecture, a seminar, an informational piece on homosexuality, transgenderism, and just some of the cause and effects of this stuff that we're seeing in our culture. And the guy giving the talk and starting the conversation led with a lot of hey, here's how the family should function, here's how the family should operate kind of stuff, right? And so you start to see as he's talking the implications behind a dad and the dad doing their role the right way and a mom performing her role the right way. And then you see it in the grand scheme of things. The big picture is that God's designed creation this way. The father has a role, the mother has a role, and when those two things are done well, you cultivate the child the right way, right? And you start to raise the child the right way. And obviously there's so many little nuances in there that you get right, wrong, or indifferent. But by and large, you see the uniqueness of fatherhood and how it shapes the child. You see the uniqueness of motherhood and how it shapes the child. And so it's challenging, right? Because I think for me, it's kind of similar to you, Lucas. One of my favorite parts of being a dad is knowing there's a unique role for me that my wife won't ever get to understand between me and my kids. And likewise for her. And that's one of my favorite things is having some exclusivity there that only my kids will get with me. The challenge to that is knowing that there's some exclusivity there that only I can provide for my kids. And there's certain conversations that I will need to have with them. And there's certain influence that I will have with them. And so it just creates unique challenges that I think God understands and that God designed us to take part in. So that's good. But I think when I think about our kids, right, and I think about, for me specifically, Dax, the things that I'm like, I look at him and I watch him watch me, and I watch him get excited about the things I'm excited about, right? Does he actually like them? I have no idea. He just matches energy. And so I think it has a lot to do with shaping our kids. And so since you're our guest today, Lucas, I would ask you this. Are there any hidden talents that you see your kids start to, take after you, whether it's music or I know you're a closet nerd, right? The more we talk, the more I realize that. That's okay. It's a good thing. But is there anything like that you think you have that your kids start to model after you?
Yeah, so I've already started to see at a young age, all of my kids have some sort of musical talent. Liam can sing pretty well already. He's already interested in those things. He wants to join school choir, and he has a pretty good voice. He's led with me on a Sunday morning before. We celebrated one Sunday our kids ministry, and he was able to be on stage with me, leading with a microphone and singing "Battle Belongs," his favorite song. And it's cool, man. It's cool to see that. I don't know if that's necessarily a hidden talent, but then both of my other two kids are already starting to sing along and match pitch, and it's really cool to see that. My oldest son is very much into video games. That is his thing, bro. And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, right? I don't want to hinder him from being able to play video games, but that's sometimes all he wants to do, right? He doesn't have school on Saturday, so he thinks, I'm going to wake up in the morning. If I wake up before mom and dad, I can go in there and I can play, all day long.
Yeah.
And so there's some challenges with that, but yeah, he gets that from me because I loved video games growing up. I kind of take a liking to video games. And so, I'd say he's probably adopted that from me. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, I think that's a good answer.
It's good. What about you, Chip? Anything that your kids start to take after you see your personality type, your hobbies, things of that nature?
Well, much like Lucas, I am also a closet nerd. I know a few people know that about me.
I'm not sure.
That.
Closet. It's part of that. As you sit here with your Batman cup at the podcast recording, I love it.
I'm just saying, you've never seen me and Batman at the same place. Yeah. But, I think with my youngest, I'm not sure that arrogance counts as a talent, but he definitely gets that from his dad.
Confident. We'll call him confident.
Well, maybe the time when he told his teacher that she should probably let him teach this section on space because he knows better than her or the authors of the textbook. So
solid.
To be fair, we would only know if he was right or wrong if we gave him the shot.
What I mean? He said, I said, well, how do you think you know better? He goes, well, I watch a lot of YouTube. Oh, well, there you go. There you go. And my oldest, he takes more after his mom, I think, which is funny because, the little one and I butt heads a little bit more because he's a lot like me, and the older one and mom butt heads a little bit more because he's more like her. But he's got this very, kind of artistic side that, I'm not sure it's a hidden talent at this point because I've got nothing to compare it to because I don't draw stick figures well, But he's got this, kind of hidden talent where he likes that a little bit. But it's funny, there's places where you see it blend in the kids, and then there's times where you're like, oh no, that kid's me. Yeah, for sure. And it terrifies you a little bit.
For sure. It's good. I love it. Well, let's shift a little bit because I feel like we got to know Lucas pretty good and got to know him as a dad and a friend here for the first couple minutes on the podcast. But Lucas, you told us you're in Live Oak, right? You're our Live Oak location pastor. And so Chip and I were both in Lake
He is indeed not our Live Oak location
pastor. Good call, good catch. Matt would be our Live Oak location pastor. You guys would just nod and be like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. I'm waiting on you guys to say it.
At all.
Somebody got to bring in Matt, let him know.
I do not covet that job at all.
Our Live Oak worship leader and student pastor at the moment. Sorry. So you were in Live Oak Sunday. Obviously, Chip and I were both here. I would love to hear about how y'all Sunday went over there in Live Oak.
Man, it was so good. A lot of people do. They see me on Sunday mornings in Live Oak and they see me leading worship and they know right off the bat, like, hey, that's like the first part of my job. I'm the worship pastor in Live Oak. Like that is what I'm supposed to do, first and foremost. But they don't see the kind of the subsect of my job, and that is leading the student ministry on Wednesday nights. And, at first, when I first started that was my first little taste of that, leading students in that facet, and I was pretty nervous.
I was going to say, do you think it was fair to say that there was a little bit of maybe apprehension around what are they asking me to do?
Yeah, for sure. I almost want to say I felt misled, right? So I'm sitting in a meeting when I'm first coming on staff, and Chip saying, hey, all it's really going to be is you leading a group of volunteers. You don't really have to do much. And I am now. I'm preaching every Wednesday night, and but no, it's been really good, and it's been super fruitful. And what was nerves at one point has turned into excitement.
Love it.
Because I see the fruit and I see the value, and I'm watching students' lives changed. And, that is going to taper into what I'm fixing to talk about for Sunday morning is in the first service and the second service, I was able to baptize some of our students. And that was just, that was a blessing, dude, just to see the stories and how they unfolded. One of them, a 7th grade girl, she gave her life to Christ at the end of last spring semester. And so to see her still stay so confident in that, because it's been, getting close to a year now since she made that decision. But man, how confident she was when she made that decision to come to me, tell me, articulate the gospel, know what she did, and I've watched how it's changed her over the last several months. And then to stay with that and say, hey, I'm ready to be baptized this Sunday. And then another one of those, an older girl, a junior, she gave her life to Christ at an event that we partnered with another church with, and she heard the gospel that night, and she said, you know what, it's time. I've been putting this off. And then not even to skip a beat, to give me her card that night and say, hey, I gave my life to Christ tonight, Pastor Lucas, and I want you to, I'm ready to be baptized. And it was just so good. Yeah, but then the rest of the service went super good. Worship was great, just as a whole. The message was awesome, and just to celebrate with people was just cool, man. To see that God's still at work. There's still new life being cultivated in our church, and just getting to celebrate that as a church is just so good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how many baptisms did y'all end up having Sunday?
We had 7 total, actually. So we had 4 in the first service and 3 in the second. So it was really good. And 2 of those were students, and then one of those was in our kids ministry. So
so just kids all the way up to students. Yeah. Any adult? Like, what was your total age range? I guess I feel like this is such a an important question. Maybe for me personally, maybe nobody else cares, but I love to hear the
No,
numbers.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had, I believe the girl that we had baptized was in like fourth, fifth grade, somewhere around in there. And then all the way up into like grown adults. We had a married couple get baptized together. Just, man, it was so cool to see that. And I've known them most of my life. So like seeing them and seeing the decision that they've made and professing that to the whole church was really awesome. But then also all the way up into a guy that's in his later 40s. And so seeing that and just seeing, man, that people are not ashamed.
Yeah.
People are not ashamed to stand before their church and just proclaim Jesus.
You know, I know we had
So good.
here in Lake City, you know, one child, and then the rest were 20-something, 30-something,
Yeah.
you know, adults. And it really is cool to hear that, because statistics would tell you that if somebody has not made a profession of faith and followed up with baptism by 12 years old, the chances that that ever happens drops drastically after that point. And so it really is special to kind of see that. Not that kids aren't, don't mishear me, but to see adults take that step of faith is really big. And honestly, in the landscape of Christianity in America, it's really rare.
Yeah. I love it, man. It's so cool just to see. So for me, right, we had 5 in Lake City, and Chip mentioned one of those was a kid. And at the end of that baptism, honestly, circling all the way back to the conversation that we had between her and her dad as they came in the office and said, hey, I think we're ready to do this, right? As I'm listening to her story, parents, if you've made it this far in the podcast, I want you to hear this. As we're listening to her story, I asked her at the end of it, so what even started like all this conversation about Jesus and baptism and all that? And her response was this: I just watched mom and dad spend time with Jesus. And I'm like, man, that's so good, right? Like, parents, you have this ministry inside your living room, inside your house every single day. And the way you model your life after Jesus, the way you lead has an impact. And so I just looked at them at the end of that baptism, and I get like emotional, because they're just doing it well, right? And I'm looking forward to the day where God hopefully blesses us with that moment, and we get to say, man, we just modeled our lives after Jesus, and we got to step into this moment. So I commended them right after her baptism. I don't usually take a minute to talk after the baptism, but after that one in particular, it was just like, man, I want you guys to know you've run the race well, and this is the fruit of that. And parents who are watching this, I want you to know this is what it looks like when you run the race well.
Well, and it's kind of cool too, because it hasn't been very long that her dad got baptized.
Yeah.
And she got to see that. And actually, he brought her and her brother to the conversation where he was talking with us about his baptism.
Yeah.
So, you know, it really is hey, they're not just listening to you, they're watching you.
Yeah.
And that's really cool.
Yeah. And then for me, there's also a special moment too. We had some friends, also a married couple, just who we've been walking through a lot of this stuff with, get baptized. And so, man, it was just a cool Sunday for me in Lake City too, because you got the kids element, you had diversity there. You had the kid, you had, hey, I've grown up in church, but I've been kind of insecure in my faith and maybe not sure. And so we've had conversations that led to this moment. Then you had the complete, like, deconstructed 2 different theological backgrounds with 3 different people coming together, and then getting to this point of like, no, I understand and I'm ready to take this step. So it's just really cool. I think the diversity of it Sunday. I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, one element I'd like to add in Live Oak, we always have our kids ministry come in when we have one of the kids ministry students get baptized.
Yeah.
And so seeing, like, 50-some, we had 58, I think, on Sunday morning. So to see 58 kids lined up against that wall, and to watch, they watched all 4 baptisms. It was just really cool to see that, man. It was
There were a
such a neat
bunch of
thing.
kids at the Orchard locations yesterday.
Yeah.
A bunch.
Yeah. Well, and,
What a good thing.
And another thing for that, those same age kids, if they were able to come to Night of Worship last week, they saw the 2 ordinances that God gave us. Right, we see the Lord's Supper. We took communion last Sunday night, and a lot of those kids, my son, my 7-year-old, and included in that, was in the room.
Yeah.
He saw that. He saw what people were doing. He saw them come forward and take that, take communion, to take the Lord's Supper. But then fast forward to this Sunday now, a week later, he sees the second of those in baptism. He sees these baptisms happen, and I just see the wheels turning.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's just so good. I'm so thankful that he's gotten to experience this.
Yeah, I'll transition to you, Chip, here for this part, because the follow-up question would be for you. Like, we saw Lord's Supper get moved to a specific night, and then we saw baptisms for us. If you've been around the Orchard much, you probably noticed this. If you haven't, then you won't. But baptisms moved to a specific Sunday as well. So maybe give us your take on why that was a big deal to you and why you saw fit to do some of that.
Yeah, I think it was the same idea as the Lord's Supper, as in, I didn't want it to be necessarily a tack on to the service. I wanted it to be a main emphasis of the service. And I know that baptism, I don't feel like had fallen as much into ritual or routine as the Lord's Supper had, but still just wanted to emphasize that, hey, this is a big deal. And just specifically cards on the table, I just really wanted us to leverage the evangelistic opportunities of baptism, right? Because when people get baptized, a lot of times they have family, friends show up to watch them get baptized and to be a part of that service. And so being able to deliberately devote that day to helping them hear the gospel, understand the gospel, make it a special day, not just in, hey, they got baptized special day, but a special day of, man, hopefully other people are taking that step of faith. And so really that was the idea, just kind of like the Lord's Supper, maybe not quite as big a shift, but the same idea. Let's bring some emphasis to this if we really do believe it's important.
Yeah, that's good. We're going to do this. So we haven't got to our nerd out section today, right, yet, but it's coming. And I think let's just do this because we haven't got to our questions either. Let's tackle two birds with one stone, and maybe you can nerd out a little bit as you answer this question, because we did have a question roll in, and the question's got like 4 parts to it. Okay, so the first part of the question is, could you guys touch on the difference between dedication and baptism? So we'll go ahead, put that down, dedication, baptism. The other part of that question being, some people worry about whether or not they're going to go to heaven if they don't get baptized, which I think the underlying theme there would be, is baptism salvific, right? Does it have salvation implications there? And then maybe just bringing some clarity on the backside if it doesn't. So what is baptism? So what's the difference between baptism and dedication? Why do some people think that baptism has implications on eternity, right? Like, does this mean I'm saved? And then if not, or if so, what is baptism then? What is it actually?
Yeah, so let's deal with the dedication one first. And I guess we should say, let's nerd out. All right, so let's deal with the dedication side of it. It is in Catholicism, primarily, others some denominational traditions as well, but in Catholicism, babies are baptized, infants are baptized as a means to wash away individual sin and to kind of make them officially a part of the church. And that's where a lot of people get this idea of, well, that's what baby dedication is. Well, no, that's not what baby dedication is. At the Orchard, and I will say churches like the Orchard, baby dedication really has nothing to do with the baby. It has everything to do with the parent. Right. It's the parent saying, look, I'm going to dedicate myself, my family, that we're going to raise this child in church to know Jesus, to love Jesus as best we can. There's nothing about dedicating a baby on Sunday morning that has anything to do with that baby's relationship with God. It's about the parent's intention to foster their relationship with God, right? And so what we believe is that baptism is only for those who have trusted Jesus as Savior. And the primary reason that we believe that is, number one, I believe it's modeled inside of the New Testament. I don't think you ever see people who had not made a profession of faith get baptized, and those who had made a profession of faith almost always were told it was because they trusted Jesus as Savior. And I think the second part of that is understanding what baptism is that baptism is first and foremost a visible symbol of the internal reality of what Jesus has done for and in the believer. And there's really 2 parts there, right? It's a visible, physical symbol of what Jesus has done for the believer. It is a symbol of his death, burial, and resurrection in the place of the believer. And that is why we baptize by immersion, that Jesus, didn't die and have some dirt thrown on top of him, but he was entombed. And so that's what the burial and baptism looks like. But he wasn't left there either. He was raised from the dead. And so we raise him back up out of the water. And that's the first symbol. But it's not just the symbol of what Jesus did for the believer. It's a symbol of what Jesus did in the believer. We were dead in our trespasses and our sins. And when we trust Christ as Savior, we are brought to new life. And so Paul does a great job in Romans chapter 6 about talking about, look, we're baptized into Christ's death. So now we are dead to that sin. So it is a picture of our old self dying to sin and being raised in a newness of life. And I think to bring it full circle, I think that's why, for me, baptism is not salvific. Baptism is not necessary for a person to be saved, because baptism is strictly symbolic. It is not a work that earns or merits grace, mercy, or forgiveness. It is not salvific. It is a symbolic picture of the salvation event that has happened in the life of the believer. I think one of the pictures that you can point to inside of the New Testament where we would see this is when the thief on the cross, who Jesus looks at and says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," he dies, and I'm certain Jesus keeps his promise. He was never baptized, right? Now, I know I have friends who believe that, no, salvation is necessary for baptism. They would say, look, that was, number one, that was before the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, so a different time period, so it doesn't count. Others would say, well, that's Jesus. He gets to do what he wants. Others would say that was the exception, not the rule. I think what we're doing is we're trying to find ways to make that fit into our theological framework. In fairness, there are some other tough verses, such as verses in Peter that talk about that we are saved through baptism, that can be hard to make it fit in our theological framework. But I feel like that Peter's language and Jesus's example are just that. Jesus gave us an example of someone who was saved and not baptized. Peter is using figurative language inside of his letter to talk about the salvific nature that baptism represents, not causes to happen. So, I think we could spend a lot more time there, but so that our nerd out section doesn't run a half hour, we can kind of put a dot on it right there.
Yeah, I think it's good to be clear, because what I believe we've seen all over across denominations and across different churches is that a lack of clarity can lead to, maybe not in that moment with that conversation, some big theological implications, but maybe with that conversation in those moments with some massive theological implications that really do have some really big trickle-down effects if we don't get it right. And so
let me jump in real quick to talk specifically about baptism with kids, because at the Orchard, we create opportunities for kids to hear the gospel and opportunities for kids to respond to the gospel, but we go out of our way to make sure that those are not high pressure, everybody raise their hand if you don't want to go to hell kind of moments, that oftentimes really just kind of mess with kids' emotions more than their faith.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is every time a child comes to want to be baptized, I think there needs to be a conversation there about why, and at the end of the day, I think we need to make sure the child understands the gospel. Why do you need to be baptized? You're not just doing this to do it or because you think somebody expects it of you. But what I would say is, at the end of the day, we are never going to be 100% certain that kid gets it before we baptize them. We're not 100% certain that this is real before they're baptized. What we do is say, look, as best we can, we believe that they get it, and we want to continue to foster their faith and say, yes, if you have gotten this, this is the step you need to take, let's do it. But then I would say this, and parents, you're listening to this, your kid's not listening to this probably. Here's what I want you to hear, parents. If you had a child who was baptized as a child and they come back to you at 16, 17, 18, 35 and say, I'm not sure I really understood back then, do not be the parent that says, oh, I was there. I remember when you were baptized. We went and talked to Pastor AJ. Like, don't be that parent, right? Because we're never 100% sure. That baptism is not a guarantee that they understood. What it is it is a next step in obedience to Jesus, because we believe as best we know that they understood. So let's not shrink away from honoring the faith of children by allowing them to follow Jesus in baptism, but let's also not hold them to that for the rest of their life if they grow up and like, hey, maybe I did miss that.
Yeah, I want to circle back. That's really good, man. I think that's a phenomenal distinguishing piece. I think it's good. I think maybe you just gave parents some permission to show some grace and to lean in. And I think what I see is parents get scared, right? Because this is the pinnacle, right, for them. And I want to make sure my kid's okay. And for eternity, right? Granted, pretty big thing there.
Seems important.
Yeah. And so I get the nervousness, and I think there's a genuineness and an openness that says, hey, let's keep the conversation going. That's part of that too. So I think that's really, really good. But man, just a phenomenal Sunday across the board. Lucas, it was a blast having you on here. Next Sunday, we're jumping into a brand new series called Excuses.
Is it ironic that we do a series called Excuses that starts on Super Bowl Sunday?
Maybe so.
I'm just saying.
Maybe
just throw that out there.
Speaking of, I was already asked, to the disappointment of the several that have asked me, are you guys doing a Super Bowl party this year? And I told them no, and you should have just seen it just drained out. So.
I mean, honestly, it's just going to be, we're protesting because of Taylor Swift is what it is.
That's the main reason, football should be about football.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, honestly, I saw a meme this week. I sent it to a friend's wife. He loves to, maybe bash on Taylor Swift a little bit, like we might have done in the podcast last week. But it said, the African American or the African elephant is the largest baby on the planet, except for NFL fans when they talk about Taylor Swift. So I thought that was pretty good, and anyway,
that's great.
Her new album's dropping. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, she announced last night at the Grammys her new album's dropping, coming out, sometime in the future. I didn't pay that much attention.
Never been.
How many Taylor Swift commercials are we going to see for the Super Bowl?
I have no idea. Now, you ask how many are we going to see? Yeah, probably none for the Parker household. I don't know. I don't know. So before we get away from the Super Bowl, got to do it. Put it on record, on the tape. Predictions.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Give me predictions.
Give me your predictions. Yeah.
What you got?
I'm thinking Brock Purdy pulls it out because America's sick of the Chiefs. I think the NFL is sick of the Chiefs. I think it's all scripted anyway. And Purdy
we talked about that last week. We blew that up.
Yeah, I'm going.
But I do
Niners.
I think
score.
Purdy pulls it out. I think it's close. I think it's 27-24 Niners for me.
Okay, Lucas.
So I think it's going to start off ugly. I think the Niners are going to come out really, really fired on all cylinders. They're going to be ahead in the first half. The Chiefs are going to kind of inch back into the game, and then in the fourth quarter, the Niners are going to pull it out like 31-24.
Deebo Samuel, big yak play, makes it in the end zone for the win.
Yeah.
Here's how this is going to go. Christian McCaffrey is going to have the pinnacle of his NFL career, the Super Bowl. He is going to shred the Patriots' run defense because they have a terrible run defense. However, they've got a solid pass defense. So what's going to happen? McCaffrey's going to shred them. Debo's going to get one tutty. It's not going to be close, but the Chiefs are going to come back to make it 31-21 in the fourth quarter with a late score.
All right.
31-21,
So
49ers.
Okay.
And it's not going to be that close.
Man. Yeah. All right. We'll see. We got 3 people that are going to be wrong if the Chiefs end up pulling us out. But
ESPN, if you hear this, we can work something out.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Man, Lucas, for real, though, I'm glad you jumped on here with us. It was a lot of fun. It was good to hear. It was a blast. Some more about you and how it is to dad and lead in ministry. Encouraged by what you guys are doing over there in Live Oak. It's so cool to be able to know one church, many locations, and things are just rocking and rolling over there. So it's been really cool. Chip, I'm sure we'll do this again soon. And
pray on that.
Yeah, excited to jump into our new series this week, Excuses.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So we will catch you guys right here next week.
Yep, see you then.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow in this journey of faith and embrace community. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us through our social media channels or visit our website and stay connected. Your questions are what make this podcast a dynamic and enriching experience. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your engagement helps us spread the message and connect with others who may find value in these conversations. Until next time, we hope this episode inspired you and will help you bring Sunday's message into your week ahead. Keep the conversation alive, and remember, we're all on this journey together.